Are you still Donald Trump's lawyer?
I mean, yes, my attorney-client relationship with President Trump remains. Yes, the cases I was representing him on, to the extent that there's anything going on like the appeal in Manhattan, I'm not part of that.
But you're still representing him as you sit here today.
Well, I mean, representing him, there's no active matters. So
Correct, but you're still his lawyer.
I have an attorney-client relationship with President Trump.
And even if you're confirmed and you're no longer representing him as a criminal defendant, even then you still have continuing moral obligations as a member of the bar, legal obligations, to your former client, correct?
Like everybody at the Department of Justice with every one of their former clients.
Correct. So you'd have a continuing duty of loyalty and confidentiality when it comes to his communications, correct?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Bondi, as Attorney General, in her first acts, established the Orwellian-sounding weaponization working group. In her memo, it says that the work of this weaponization group will be supported by the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. That is the office that you will occupy. Would you agree that it would be a blatant conflict of interest as his criminal defense lawyer, as someone who has a continuing legal obligation to him as a former client, for you to participate in any of the work of that group as it pertains to the January 6th case that you represented him, or the Mar-a-Lago case where you represent him, or Alvin Bragg's office where you represent him? You would agree that that would be a very blatant conflict of interest?
I don't necessarily agree with that. There will be a conflict of interest potentially, but I quibble with the word blatant. And it depends on,
okay.
I mean,
take out the word blatant, but isn't it a clear conflict of interest? You've represented him in these cases. You acknowledge you still have a continuing obligation to him in these cases. How could you possibly oversee an investigation or review of the prosecutors in these cases when you handled them? How is that not the most obvious conflict of interest?
I am not saying I can or I cannot. I'm saying I'm not going to say to you today, Senator, yes, there's a blatant conflict of interest.
Well, why?
I don't know what the work is.
Well, can't you acknowledge that if you're asked to supervise cases involving your own cases, that would be a conflict of interest?
That's a very different hypothetical. Certainly.
No, it's not hypothetical. You're subject to the order of the Attorney General now to support that working group. That working group is going to look at the January 6 cases and the Mar-a-Lago case, the cases you worked on. So can you acknowledge it would be a conflict for you to oversee that work?
What I'm not acknowledging is the broad strokes you're giving it. That work, for example. There will be conflicts, and I will not violate my ethical obligations.
Well, let me just ask you with great specificity, will you recuse yourself from overseeing the January 6th case, the Mar-a-Lago case, and the Alvin Bragg case? Will you recuse yourself from the working group's supervision of those investigations?
I will follow the rules as told to me by the experts, career prosecutors in the department when it comes to every recusal.
I've heard that.
But it's true.
Well, it may be true in the abstract.
No, it's not abstract. It's true.
Well, here's the thing, Mr. Blanche, which you well know. You may very well get some opinion of an ethics lawyer appointed by the administration to tell you that you can exercise your discretion. If you believe it's a conflict, you can say you won't participate. If you don't, you can participate. So you may have discretion. So I'm asking you, how will you exercise that discretion? Will you recuse yourself from overseeing an investigation into matters where you are his lawyer? That shouldn't be hard.
You just gave a purely hypothetical because the
this is not hypothetical. This is in black and white. It says, and I will read it, I hereby establish the weaponization working group, which will be led by the Office of the Attorney General and supported by the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. So this is what you're going to be asked to do. If you are given the discretion of overseeing cases in which you were his lawyer, will you recuse yourself?
It depends. The hypothetical you just described said that a career ethics attorney tells me I do not have to recuse for whatever reason. Because again, we are talking about hypotheticals. If the career Justice Department attorney says to me, you do not have to recuse yourself, I'm not going to sit here today and say that I will still say I will
Okay,
recuse
well,
myself.
I mean, that answers my question. You don't think it's a conflict of interest sufficient that you would, sitting here today, tell me
That's
that
not
you
what I
were.
said.
Yeah, no, I
not what I said.
I get it. I find it remarkable where we are.
Well, you're restating something I didn't state, Senator.
No, I find it remarkable that you feel there's any world in which you could somehow participate in an investigation of people where you represented the president in that same investigation.
I didn't say that.
Well, if you're not willing to commit to recusal, so that means you're willing to entertain supervising that work. So that tells me something. But let me move on because I think you've made your position clear. Let me ask you very specifically about the Mar-a-Lago case. The Justice Department formally had recommended Volume 2 be made public. Do you support Volume 2 of the report being made public?
No.
Okay. Do you commit to preserving the evidence in both those investigations?
I commit for sure to following the law and following the rules.
But you won't commit to preserving the evidence. Let's say you have the discretion about destroying the evidence. Do you commit today to preserving the evidence in both those cases?
I commit to following the law.
Okay. And if you can't commit to preserving the evidence in those cases in which you were the defense lawyer, I think, again, that speaks to the conflict of interest that you have as the president's defense lawyer.
I did not commit to it. I said I would follow the law.
No,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what.
Mr. Blanche, I understand everybody's going to say generically they'll follow the law. But I've asked you a simple question about whether you will preserve evidence, and you can't say yes.
No.
You can't say yes.
I hope every single DOJ attorney, political, career, or anybody would say they would follow the rules as it
And
regards.
I would hope that any DOJ attorney will say, I will always preserve evidence. There's no circumstance in which I will destroy evidence. That's what I would hope. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
All right, let's break this down because there is so much to unpack here, and frankly, it's frustrating just to watch. Right out of the gate, from the very first second, Schiff comes in hot, trying to establish this narrative that Blanche is somehow compromised because he's Donald Trump's lawyer. Are you still Donald Trump's lawyer? Schiff asks, trying to make it sound like some dark, sinister secret. Blanche, cool as a cucumber, is just like, yes, I am. Because guess what, folks? In America, everyone has the right to legal representation, even the people Adam Schiff doesn't like. It's called the Constitution. Maybe Schiff should read it sometime. Blanche doesn't flinch. He just states the facts. He's representing his client. That's his job. Then Schiff tries to drag in this weaponization working group memo. Now notice what Schiff does here. He tries to frame this hypothetical scenario as a blatant conflict of interest. He's trying to force Blanche to agree to a premise that hasn't even happened yet. It's the classic, when did you stop beating your wife type of questioning. And Blanche handles it perfectly. He acknowledges that, sure, in a vacuum there could be a conflict, but he also points out the obvious, he hasn't even been given the details of what this group is doing. More importantly, he says, I won't violate my ethical obligations. That should be the end of the story. But of course, it's not enough for Schiff. He wants his viral moment. He starts demanding a yes or no on recusal. This is where Schiff's hypocrisy really shines. He wants Blanche to make a legally binding commitment right there on the spot based on a hypothetical situation without consulting the career ethics experts at the DOJ. Think about that. Schiff, a supposedly serious lawmaker, is essentially telling a nominee to ignore the established protocols and ethics guidelines of the Department of Justice just to satisfy his own political vendetta. And when Blanche rightly points out that a career ethics advisor might advise him differently, Schiff acts like it's the most outrageous thing he's ever heard. Schiff's whole strategy here is to create a trap. If Blanche says yes, he's boxed himself in unnecessarily. If Blanche says no, Schiff gets to clip it and run to MSNBC to complain about how corrupt the DOJ is. It's completely transparent. Then we get to the end, and this is the cherry on top. Schiff brings up Mar-a-Lago and tries to corner Blanche on making evidence public and preserving evidence. Again, he's demanding simplistic yes or no answers to complex legal and ethical questions. When Blanche says he will follow the law, Schiff tries to spin that as a refusal to preserve evidence. Are you kidding me? I will follow the law is exactly what you want a DOJ official to say. It means they aren't going to make arbitrary decisions based on political pressure, which is exactly what Schiff is trying to apply. Schiff tries to end it with this dramatic statement about how any typical attorney should be able to commit to preserving evidence, implying Blanche is somehow rogue. But anyone with half a brain can see that Blanche isn't refusing to preserve evidence. He's refusing to let Adam Schiff dictate his legal and ethical obligations in a Senate hearing designed to produce sound bites, not actual oversight. In the end, Todd Blanche came off looking like the only adult in the room. He refused to play Schiff's games, he stuck to his principles, and he highlighted just how absurd this whole line of questioning really was. It was a masterclass in dealing with a bad faith actor, and honestly, Schiff walked right into it.